RFactor 2's online ranked racing has now come out of beta, and after 12 hours of testing it non-stop whilst live streaming, I'm going to tell you how good it is, how well it works, and why you really need to give this a go. You can use the Gamer Muscle Fanatec affiliate link in the description when buying fancy pants sim racing equipment to make yourself feel even worse about spending all your money on steering wheels and pedals. 9 out of 10 subscribers regret subscribing to this channel. So first things first, now as I say, it's out of beta and in the normal version of the game. So if you've got RFactor 2, you can now just jump in and do the online ranked racing. The rookie races all use base content that's in the basic key of the game, which you can pick up super cheap. So that's the Radical SR3, the BMW M2, and this F4 car, and then the tracks that they use with that are all stuff included in the game. Now, assuming you intend to rank up and play more, and then you'll want to do the more advanced races which don't use this stuff that's included in the game and uses DLC, at the moment it's Black Friday, so you can pick up cars and tracks super cheap, and you'll be glad to know that you don't need to have all the cars to take part in, say for example, the GT3 stuff that's racing. You can just buy one GT3 car and the track that's running, and then you'll be able to do those races. So I would really take advantage of Black Friday to get one of the packs they're doing, which is reduced, or specifically buy tracks, because cars will obviously be cheaper in the future anyway and you won't need to buy loads of cars, but having tracks is normally the sticking point moving forwards. But yeah, with the basic copy of the game, you can have a bloody good time racing online, and then if you get the DLC, you can have an even better time with some other cars and more stuff to do. And nothing's really changed, to be honest, from the beta to the normal release version of the game, or what has changed is very subtle. But that's not really a bad thing, because the beta was already really good. The car contact and netcode is far better than iRacing. And keep in mind, you're not having to pay a monthly subscription to play this game. This game, though, RFactor 2 does lack the amazing netcode feature that iRacing has of X-Prize spontaneous Tony Hawk's kickflip vehicles going over hills. And RFactor 2 is lacking cars flashing on and off, but hopefully motorsport games can implement that into the future to make this a proper realistic racing simulator. I will say as well, the car contacts and close racing is just so much better than most other simulators online. You really genuinely can have very aggressive close driving. There are some quirks to RFactor 2. Specifically, if the car on the inside, if the car on the outside turns into them, it will knock the car on the inside off, where you'd probably expect the car on the outside to be more affected. You know, it's not perfect. It still has its own multiplayer gameplay stuff to work out, but it's relatively forgiving and really good fun. I might give it to Race Room for better netcode, but it's you know, it's 50-50 really. But absolutely fantastic to just drive online. And then in terms of actually the racing that we did the last 12 hours, we found that there was always servers running, multiple splits running, and the racing was on a par, but it was better than iRacing. You still had some stupid drivers, there was still dumb stuff happening, but no worse than iRacing or LFM, for example. It was pretty, or no worse than what you see in many real-world races, to be honest. A lot of sim racers think real-world races are immaculately clean. Go and watch BTCC support races and then come back to me on that. So, yeah, no, it's just really, really good. I had 12 hours of maybe 1 or 2 races were a bit dud-ish with me getting punted a bit, but I still managed to finish those races. And all in all, we just had a really fun time driving the vehicles and racing other cars. I will say as well, compared, again, I'm going to keep making the comparisons to iRacing because that's the big online ranked platform that most people will be comparing it to. Compared to iRacing, the actual learning of the tracks, some of them, for example, Tobin Raceway here, are fictional tracks. A lot of the other tracks are real-world tracks. But the actual learning of the tracks is fun in RFactor 2. The handling of the vehicles in RFactor 2 is actually fun. Like sliding through the corners a little bit, overdriving, dialing it down is actually enjoyable. It's like Race Room, Assetto Corsa Automobilista 1, where the cars drive like cars. This is another, maybe they need to change things massively in those sims I just mentioned, and actually do more iRacing where the cars drive like some kind of weird bobsled. But yeah, funnily enough, if a car's actually somewhat realistic in that you can overdrive it, pull it back from the limit, you know, make little dive bomb moves, mess things up and still recover it a bit. Maybe RFactor 2 is a little bit overly forgiving in some ways and maybe a little bit too slidey in some ways, give or take. Maybe it's not like a real car exactly, but the overall process in RFactor 2 is just on another level more realistic than how iRacing drives, which makes it so much more fun just to play, just to drive around, even when you're not racing other vehicles, when you're learning the track, when you're getting up to speed, and then when you are racing other vehicles. It's just a real delight to actually be dancing with the vehicle and throwing the car in a bit and manipulating the car's physics to get an overtake done. And if you were watching the live stream last night, we had some absolutely cracking overtakes. Me miraculously overtaking people nicely, but also other people overtaking me, and it's like, oh wow, great overtake. I actually enjoyed that. It didn't feel cheesy. It didn't feel like a pre-scripted stupid drive under the limit overtake with me slowly going off the track. It felt like I was actually outmaneuvered and outplayed by another driver. So yeah, absolutely, if you haven't gathered it, absolutely fantastic fun. Now I will say, not to be entirely positive, I will say unfortunately with the ranking, though it's out of beta, they are still running the BMW M2. The car selection a little bit, you know, I think they could probably do with getting some GT4 cars in here, or maybe running a GT3 car in one of the hourly slots rather than the 30-minute GT3 race. No, it's not terrible though. Like the Radical SR3 is really fun to race. This F4 is really good to race. I think the M2 is just a bit weird, to be honest. But then it cycles, so if you've got one thing you don't like, it's only an hour till the next thing, and you can just choose what you want there. Now, due to them using the free tracks, or the included stuff in the base game, unfortunately, some of those tracks do look really dated. So graphically, compared to other, like even compared to AC, especially with the new shader patch and Pure, graphically RFactor 2 looks really dull and miserable. And same compared to iRacing ACC, it looks really miserable. Though compared to ACC, it doesn't look blurry. And it actually runs really well with all the mirrors, so you know, I take that over ACC. But yeah, you can't escape it. RFactor 2, with a lot of the content that's in it, looks super dated, and the quality of the tracks especially really is massively different from track to track. So hopefully that's something they can polish and improve in the future. When you're driving like Lime Rock Park, Laguna Seca, or new circuits, they look great, and you know, more than good enough that you wouldn't be bothered by it. But when you drive some of these older tracks, you're like, oh god, this looks like I'm playing RFactor 1 or something. So, you know, but those are the included tracks with the game, and the game you can pick up for a few quid, the base game. So it doesn't really matter. And then the thing I found and what I really enjoyed is that I play this at 120 FPS. Constant, no drops at all, immaculately smooth on my 4K screen, and that's with the 20 car grid and whatever's happening at the start. And to me, I will actually personally compromise graphics, for the point of this is racing, online racing. I don't really care about the graphics so much. I like the graphics, but it's all about frame rate first and then graphics. And the fact that I'm able to get RFactor 2 to just run super smooth with the cars on the screen whilst racing and doing the rank racing is really nice. And again, one thing I found with iRacing, weirdly from track to track, you can have big issues with frame timing and frame performance just completely out of the blue. You have to have tested the track beforehand, whereas this seems to be, from the 4 or 5 tracks we've driven now, seems to be pretty consistent to hitting 120 FPS without issue. In terms of other things to be aware of with the online racing, another feature that's actually really nice in RFactor 2, which we did make use of, is the report feature. After you finish a race, it gives you the position board. It tells you with a nice little animation if you've improved your safety rating, your ranking, or gone down. But then you can also see a scoreboard. You can just click next to a driver's name and report them immediately with a little description and saying what lap it is if they've been wrecking you. Which is so much better than the convoluted wait half a decade reporting system that iRacing has. I don't know if the reporting actually works in RFactor 2 and if they are, you know, taking note of these reports and actually banning people from the multiplayer. But we'll have to wait and see for that. But even if they're not at the moment or whatever's going on with that, I have to say the vast majority of racing in the online sessions was really, really clean, with, for the most part, people being rather courteous and not driving like complete buffoons. And some of the accidents we happened could easily have been described by the sort of general newbie things that people tend to do. There was no outright wrecking. Once, okay, there was one guy basically outright wrecked us in 12 hours. Other than that, it was sort of the normal annoying stuff that people tend to do, where they ignore the fact there's a car on the inside or they ignore the fact there's a car on the outside, you know. Easy mistakes to make. So maybe at higher ranks it gets better, but probably won't, you know. You know how it's like with online racing. So generally speaking, it was as good as iRacing online in terms of how clean it was, if not cleaner because of the way the contacts work. Now, nicely, the rookie races have a fixed setup. You can change fuel and some minor things, but it's fixed setup, so that's really great. I think that compacts things, reduces the complexity. Unfortunately, the races up from the rookies are open setup, which you know, it's not the end of the world, but I think it would be better if those were fixed setup as well, or maybe had limited setup options. And then maybe like if they do even longer races, the intermediate races are 30 minutes long. If they did even longer races, making them open setup, because I just feel like open setup turns into whoever has the most amount of time to fiddle to find the meta for the specific car in the specific sim. B, whoever happens to download the generally competitive setup off the internet, then just has a random advantage without them even having to have bothered to actually put the time into it. And C, why not just give everyone the same car and the same opportunity, especially when it comes to jumping sprint racing, where the objective is to just have close online racing. It's not a proper league race, and it's not an hour or 40+ minute race where, you know, real strategy comes into it for when you decide to pit, how aggressive you drive, all this stuff. That's when open setup makes sense. For even 30 minutes is still a sprint race, basically, especially with GT3 cars. I think it would be better just to have fixed setup, and with the BTCC cars, because it will just make closer racing. So I think I would like that to be fixed setup. I'm not too bothered about it being open setup. The default setups weren't awfully uncompetitive. You can still jump in and drive it, but you know what I mean. I've made this argument many times before. Unless you're doing really long races, I think just fixed setup is better for everyone. I would also say as well, it would be really nice, and I think they're missing out on getting a lot more players into this, if rather than the GT3 race being every few hours, a 30-minute GT3 race, they would really do well to have a GT3 race that's every hour or so, as a 25-minute race. Now, you don't want to dilute the other rookie stuff, which is really nice because there's so many splits on that and it's very active, but you just know that people love GT3. It would be a nice change up from the sort of stock cars, the cars they have in the lowest series at the moment. And the fact with GT3 is you've got a whole bunch of different vehicles there, so it stays compelling that you can drive the Porsche, then you can try a McLaren, then you can try, you know, an Aston Martin while still doing the same race. You know, it keeps you active online. Personally, I am not a big fan of GT3. I think there's too much GT3 in all the sims. But the fact is, it gets players into these things and it's very addictive. And I hate to say it, I actually think the GT3 cars in RFactor 2 are quite fun to drive because you can move them around a lot more, and they don't feel like they're on bloody rails like they do in ACC and iRacing. They actually shuffle and produce, and that allows you to get aggressive overtakes. It produces more dynamic racing. They're like the GT3 cars in the original Assetto Corsa in many ways. I'd probably actually say the RFactor 2 GT3 cars are probably some of the most fun GT3 cars to drive. I don't really care if they're realistic or not. I think they probably are reasonably realistic in many ways, but that doesn't really matter. They are fun to drive, and I think they'll produce good racing. So it'd be nice to see more of that, and I think more fans of RFactor 2 or just more fans of online racing would like that as well. But, you know, all said and done, I don't want this video to go on too long. The main thing is go and get RFactor 2 now whilst it's on sale. As I say, I'd recommend getting tracks over cars if you're on a tight budget, or just buy one of their packs they're running. You're going to get good value for money out of this. This is a million times better to drive and race than most stuff that's come out recently. My list of sims would be Assetto Corsa 1 is by far the overall most realistic to drive, force feedback depth and everything, but obviously doesn't have a ranked online system until Low Fuel Motorsport maybe does one. Hopefully that's what they're doing right now. But AC at the top, then I'd say RFactor 2, then you've got like Race from AMS 1 and stuff, and then sort of iRacing further down. So, you know, really worth having this. You're going to get a lot of fun. The rank system is fantastic. Great job by Motorsport Games. That's it really. Go get it. Don't listen to me, just go get it. Bloody great. Thank you for watching this video. If you got this far in the video, type in the comments, I regret getting this far in the video. I'm always surprised by people that manage to get to the end of my videos without a nosebleed and passing out and being found as a rotting corpse. You know, I'm always surprised by that. But there you go. It happens. There. That's what an anticlimactic ending. To all the corpses that got to the end, congratulations. Thank you. Until the next one, thank you for watching. See you online. See you in the live stream. Take care. Happy tea drinking. And goodbye.